The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish religious work, ascribed by tradition to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. Enoch was considered by Jews and early Christians to have been exceptionally righteous in his generation, and to have been privileged to walk and talk with God. However, the Book of Enoch was not included in the Jewish biblical canon, and is therefore regarded as non-canonical by mainstream Jews and most Christians. This raises the question, why was the Book of Enoch excluded from the Bible? There are several key reasons why the Book of Enoch was ultimately not accepted as scripture and included in the biblical canon. Let's take a deeper look at some of the major factors that contributed to its exclusion. Scholars generally agree that the Book of Enoch was not composed until somewhere between 300–100 BC, making it a rather late composition compared to the accepted books of the Bible. The Old Testament books were completed around 400 BC, so Enoch post-dated the completion of the biblical canon. Its late authorship raised questions about whether it should be considered on the same level as the older, traditionally accepted texts. While the text claims that it was written by Enoch himself, most scholars agree this is unlikely given that Enoch would have lived around 3000 BC. The book is believed to have been written in pieces by different anonymous authors, with material being added over centuries in a process of pseudo-epigraphic accretion. The lack of clear single authorship raised doubts about its authenticity and reliability compared to other biblical works. The Book of Enoch contains material that seems to have been influenced by or dependent on other non-canonical Jewish apocryphal works such as the Book of Dreams, the Apocalypse of Weeks, and the Epistle of Enoch. This association with other non-biblical texts further distanced it from the established canon. The Book of Enoch contains some material that contradicts details found in the biblical books. For example, it gives specific names and roles for angels that are not mentioned elsewhere in the Bible. It also portrays Noah as a preacher who warned of the coming flood, whereas Genesis simply depicts him as righteous in his generation. Such inconsistencies raised doubts about whether it could be considered an authentic continuation of the biblical narrative. The Book of Enoch expands Jewish eschatology and cosmology in ways that differ from the theology presented in the Bible. For instance, it describes fallen angels, a detailed apocalyptic worldview involving week-long time periods, and elaborate descriptions of heaven and hell that are absent from the Old Testament. Such divergent theological perspectives made it difficult to reconcile with the accepted scriptures. In the centuries after Christ, some Christian groups like the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and Ebionites accepted the Book of Enoch as canonical, while the early Catholic Church rejected it. This association with groups deemed heretical by the emerging orthodoxy further marginalized the book and contributed to its exclusion from the biblical canon. The Book of Enoch was not written in Hebrew like the Old Testament texts, but was composed in either Aramaic or Ancient Greek. Scholars believe the earliest sections may have been written in Aramaic, then portions were later translated into Greek, with the Ethiopic version being a translation from Greek. The lack of Hebraic origins set it apart from the established Hebrew scriptures. The Book of Enoch was not found among the Dead Sea Scrolls and was not widely known among Jews until the Middle Ages. By the time it was rediscovered in the 17th century, the biblical canon had long been formalized. Its late discovery meant it missed the window for consideration during canon debates in the late Second Temple period. In summary, the Book of Enoch was excluded from the biblical canon primarily due to its late date of composition, uncertain single authorship, dependence on other apocryphal works, some contradictions with the Bible, divergent theology, association with heretical groups, lack of Hebraic origins, and discovery after the canon was closed. While it contains some material considered important to certain religious sects, its non-canonical status is largely due to these textual and historical factors that set it apart from the established scriptures. The Book of Enoch therefore provides an interesting case study in the process of canon formation and what determined inclusion or exclusion from the biblical canon.